Now, without any waste of time, let us go through the last activity that civil rights activists were involved in. And this one is known as non-violent marches. So it means it was just not one, but there were many. So now in this case, I want you to look at the picture again or the photograph and identify the name of the marches. And I'm sure by saying marches, you already know which marches am I referring to. But now without any waste of time, just think of the marches that are being shown in this picture. Now, this photograph is actually representing one of the Selma Montgomery marches. One of the Selma Montgomery marches of 1965. And why are they called Selma Montgomery? It's because the Americans were actually marching from Selma to Montgomery. So they were marching from Selma to Montgomery. Hence, these marches are known as Selma Montgomery marches. They were still demanding the right to vote. They were still demanding that African Americans should also be given the right to vote. Remember in the previous campaign, Freedom Summer, African Americans, they were actually demanding that they also be allowed to register as voters. Now, this struggle was still continuing in the next march or the next phase, which is the Selma Montgomery marches. So now in this case, this one took place in 1965. Remember, this Freedom Summer campaign took place in 1964. Now, it says African Americans in Selma, Alabama, had tried for several times unsuccessfully to register as what? As voters. Only 2.4% of African American people in Selma had registered to vote. Why? Because of obstacles and intimidation by the white authorities. Now, what you need to know, learners, is that they were also expected to write a literacy test, of which most of them did not pass because they were illiterate. So they could not read, they could not write. So in that case, they did not pass the test, which is one of the reasons why only 2.4% of African Americans were registered as voters. So it's because of the obstacles, the literacy test, and the intimidation by the white authorities. Now it says the CRM leaders decided to stage a symbolic march in protest from Selma to Montgomery. Remember what I said. The reason why these marches are known as Selma Montgomery marches, it's because now it says here the march took place despite an order from the Alabama governor prohibiting it. Basically, it means the governor of Alabama did not give the civil rights movement activists to proceed with the march, but they tried by all means to actually defy the instruction of the governor. So they proceeded with the march. Now, in this case, why are we referring to this march as Selma Montgomery marches? It's because there were three of them. I'm sure you know by now to say there was the first march, the second march, and the third march. Hence, they are known as marches, not march, but marches. Why? It's because they were three. So now they proceeded with the march, which is the first march, which took place on 7 March 1965. Now, what you need to know in this case is that Martin Luther King Jr. was not part of the march. Now, it says marchers were confronted by the armed troops on Edmund Pettus Bridge. Armed troops. Now, it says troops attacked protesters with tear gas, batons, cattle prods, and whips. More than 50 people were injured. Now, going back to that photograph, I want us to go back to that photograph. Can you see how the marchers were actually attacked by the state troopers in this case? Remember, the march was non-violent. It was a peaceful march, even though Martin Luther King Jr. was not part of the first march, but the marchers remained peaceful. Now it says the scenes of violence were broadcasted. Again, the role of the media. Very important. They made sure that they expose the brutality again. So it says the scenes of the violence were broadcasted across the US and caused national shock and outrage or anger. It means people were angered by what they saw. They were shocked as well because non-violent protesters were brutally attacked by the state troops. Now it says the widespread publicity of violence gained support for the civil rights movement. Now, because of what people saw, they started to support the civil rights movement. But remember again, in this case, they were fighting for the right to vote, but they were being attacked. Now, did they give up? This is the first march where they were now being attacked. Where did they give up? No, they went for the second march. Now, this time, Martin Luther King Jr. was there. It says on 9 March, Martin Luther King Jr. attempted to lead another march from Selma. Why another? Remember, the first one did not succeed because the marchers were actually attacked by the state troops. So now in this case, they are attempting for the second march, hence, or for the second time, hence it's known as the second march. It says when they reached the Edmund Pettus Bridge again, they were once again confronted by the state troopers or the state troops. Now, King ordered the crowd to turn back to avoid confrontation. Now, again, he was now promoting what? Non-violence. He ordered the marchers to actually turn back instead of fighting back. President Johnson went on television pledging his support for the march. Now, he was pledging his support. He was actually saying he is actually in support of the what? Of the march, and used the occasion to garner support for the voting rights bill that he was about to introduce. The court order banning the march was lifted. So now it means the march was now legal after the announcement of President Johnson. So now the court order banning the march was lifted, and the state troopers were actually ordered not to stop the protesters. So now this actually gave them the courage to actually proceed with another march known as the Third March. Hence we call them Selma Montgomery marches. So on 21 March 1965, thousands of Americans assembled at Selma again to do what? To participate in the Third March. And remember, this time the march was legal. The march was no longer banned, it was legal. So it says this time they were protected by the US Army and Alabama National Guard forces. Now, the marchers this time managed to reach Montgomery. Remember, with the first and second march, they could not reach Montgomery because they were confronted by the state troops. But now, because the march was legal, as per the announcement that was made by Johnson, they managed to successfully march from Selma to Montgomery. They were met by nearly 50,000 African Americans and white supporters. After the campaign, more African Americans registered as what? As voters. Now, in response to the Selma Montgomery marches, there is an act or there's a law that was actually introduced and passed, and it's known as the Voting Rights Act. Remember, here they were demanding the right to vote. So there's an act that was actually passed, which is known as the Voting Rights Act. So which basically means that now African Americans were now allowed to vote. This act actually gave all Americans the right to vote. So now let us go to the next slide, which is a picture representing the arrival of the marchers at Montgomery. So now it says here, this is an aerial photograph taken at Dexter Avenue in front of the Alabama State capital in Montgomery on 25 March 1965. It shows some 25,000 marchers who managed to arrive at the Montgomery on their third attempt after leaving Selma on 21 March 1965. Third attempt. It means in this march, they were now trying for the third time, but this one was successful. Now it shows a crowd there, or it shows a large crowd arriving at Montgomery, which shows that this march was indeed successful. Now, going to the activity for today, remember, I said to you, the examiner will just zoom into any protest or any march. So it doesn't mean that the examiner will focus on all of them at the same time. The examiner will just zoom into one. Now, how will you know which one the examiner has decided to focus on for this exam or for a particular exam? You need to go through the key question. So in this case, the key question says, what were the challenges encountered by the civil rights protesters who participated in the Selma to Montgomery marches in 1965. Remember in the previous slide, the question paper that we focused on was on freedom rides. Now this one is on the Selma Montgomery marches. So it's important for you to go through the key question. So now I want you to go through source 3A. Go through source 3A and answer this 4 questions. Go through source 3A and answer these 4 questions. You have 10 minutes to do that. Just 10 minutes. Answer the questions. Make sure you read the source. And remember, when you read the source, you need to start with the one, with the contextualization. It's the one that tells you what the source is all about. It says the source below outlines reasons for the Selma, or reasons for the first Selma to Montgomery march in the United States of America on 7 March 1965. Now, it means when you go through this source, you will know more about the reasons for this march. It also highlights why it was referred to as a Bloody Sunday. So now I want you to go through the source and answer this 4 questions. You have 10 minutes, learners, to answer the 4 questions. Now, welcome back, learners. Hope you had enough time to answer the questions. Now, let us go through the answers together. Now, the first question says, list 3 organizations in the source. In the source, even if there are other organizations that you know of, but you are not allowed to give them as your answers here because the question strictly says in the source, that participated in the voting rights campaign in Selma on 2 January 1965. Now the instruction says 3 and the mark allocation there says 3. Remember, the first number before the multiplication sign tells you how many answers to give. So in this case, the first one will be from the source, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which is SCLC, 1 mark. Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, 1 mark. And the Dallas Country Voters League, 1 mark. Now let's move on to the next question. Define the term voting rights campaign in your own words. Voting rights campaign in your own words. Remember, I said to you, are not going to be asked to define a term that is not in the source. If you are not sure with what the term means, you can go back to the source to actually try to understand what this concept is all about so that you can be able to come up with your own definition. So it says it's an organized electoral campaign which seeks to influence the decision-making of the voters, voting of the voters. It's a campaign that seeks to influence the decision-making of the voters. 2 marks. That is not the only answer that you can give. You can also say it's a protest by African Americans to have what? To have voting rights. Remember, Selma Montgomery marches, they wanted to have the right to vote. So it was a what? A voting right campaign. It's a planned activity, or planned activities rather, carried out over time in order to effect political and social changes by mobilizing and convincing citizens to do what? Convincing citizens to vote for a particular political party. Now, remember in South Africa, when we approach the voting time, would have political parties campaigning, trying to influence people to vote for them. Now, again, that will be known as a what? A voting campaign. Now, the other answer that you can give is planned activities carried out over time in order to effect political and social changes by mobilizing and convincing citizens to vote for a particular political party. So these are some of the answers that you can give, but any other relevant answer will be credited. Now, 3.1.3. Why do you think only 2% of the local blacks appeared on the voters' roll in Selma? Only 2%. Remember, from the notes, the literacy test, the intimidation, and also the obstacles as well. So the answers that you can give here, it says, why do you think? Not according to the source. Because of segregationist laws, which also denied many African Americans the right to do what? The right to vote in Alabama. The reason why only 2% is because African Americans were not given the right to vote in Alabama. Now, the other answer that you can give, African Americans faced threats and intimidation from white supremacists. So now that is one of the reasons that you can give. Registration facilities were not accessible to African Americans. And then 3.1.4. You can also add the one of the literacy test to say they were expected to write the literacy test before they can be given the right to register as voters. So most of them did not pass the test, which actually made it impossible for them to register. That is the other answer that you can give. 3.1.4, it says, using the information in the source and your own knowledge, explain how demonstrators benefited from the media coverage. I think throughout we have been discussing the role of the media to say it assisted African Americans by exposing the violent attack and the police brutality that they faced in different protests. So now the question says, explain how demonstrators, those who were involved in the marches, benefited from the media coverage of the Bloody Sunday incident. Remember the first march, which is also known as, what happened in that march is also known as the Bloody Sunday incident. Reason being, they were violently attacked, they were beaten, and they were also arrested. So now in this case, it says brutality by police or state troopers was widely exposed on national television coverage. So the media played a very important role by exposing on national TV, by exposing what the police or the state troopers did on national TV. It led to national and international sympathy in supporting the demands of the demonstrators. And lastly, it led to national and international embarrassment to the USA and its leaders, forcing them to listen to the demands of the protesters. So the media actually benefited the demonstrators. Now, moving on to source 3B, I would like you to go through the source again and answer these 4 questions. Quickly, you have 10 minutes again to answer the 4 questions. Remember to go through the contextualization of the source. You have 10 minutes. You may start now. Welcome back, learners. Hope you had enough time to answer the questions. Now let us go through the answers. 3.2.1. Give 2 reasons in the source that Major Cloud provided as to why the demonstration on 7 March 1965 could not occur. Mark allocation 2, times 1, and the instruction also says 2. Reasons from the source. This is an unlawful assembly. That is the first reason that he gave. The second one, you have been banned by the governor. Those are the 2 answers that you can give from the source. Now explain the implication of the statement. What does the statement imply? There will be no weight in the context of Major Cloud's attitude towards the activists. Mark allocation 1 times 2. Now he's saying there will be no weight. So it basically means he was not willing to listen to the demands of the what? Of the demonstrators or the marchers. He was not willing to give them a chance to talk. So now these are the answers that you can give. Major Cloud's intention was to ensure that the march was blocked. He was not ready to listen and discuss the pleas of the protesters. So those are the 2 answers that you can give. But in this case, the mark allocation just says 1 times 2, so only 1 answer will be correct. And you are not only limited to these 2 answers, any other relevant answer, since this is an interpretation question, any other relevant answer will be credited. And then 3.2.3, comment on why you think the state troopers use derogatory words when they addressed the demonstrators during the first march from Selma to Montgomery. Mark allocation 2 times 2. So these are the answers that you can give. They used those words because they were racist towards African Americans. They were racist. They were racist towards African Americans. So they were racist, not racists. They were racist towards African Americans. And then the other answer that you can give, they used them to provoke the protesters so that they can retaliate, so as to justify the police extensive use of violence, tear gas, and mounted police. And then the last one, to break the courage and instill fear amongst African Americans so that they can stop the march or stop proceeding. Lastly, to break the courage and instill fear amongst African Americans so that they can stop the march, so that they can have that fear of proceeding with the march. So any other relevant answer will be credited. So in this case, the mark allocation is 2 times 2, which basically means that any other relevant answer will be credited. So now 3.2.4, state 3 effects in the source, again from the source, that the tear gas which was thrown by the state troopers had on the marchers. So 3 times 1, again from the source. From the source. So now these are the answers that you can give in this case. So now the answers are as follows. People became sick, 1 mark. Started vomiting, 1 mark. Forced off the highway and behind some buildings in the woods. So these are the answers that you can give. Remember, the question says the 3 effects in the source. So even if you can think of any that we discussed in this lesson, you are not allowed to give them as your answers because the question says from the source. And then your homework, which is a continuation of this question paper, focusing more on paragraph writing. Because remember, each and every question has a paragraph. So it's important for you to familiarize yourself on how to write a paragraph. And remember, when you write a paragraph, you need to actually start with an opening statement that is in relation to the question. So now in this case, when you start your paragraph, you should just indicate that there are many challenges that the Selma Montgomery marchers actually experienced during the marches. because this is what the question is all about. Remember, the key question is always the same as the paragraph question. So in this case, our key question is about the challenges that the marchers or the protesters actually experienced during the Selma Montgomery marches. So when you start your paragraph, you need to start by indicating or giving the marker or the reader an idea of what the paragraph is all about. So you need to have that opening statement that is in line with the question that is being asked. So you can start by saying there are many challenges that the marchers of Selma Montgomery marches experienced during the marches. So in this case, you are basically saying there are many challenges that they came across during the marches. So in that case, it tells the reader that this paragraph is all about the challenges that the marchers actually experienced during the Selma Montgomery marches. And in this case, make sure that you have some points. Even before going through the sources, you should be having some answers based on what we discussed. To say they were arrested, some were arrested, they were beaten by the police. You can talk about the police brutality. So there's a lot. So in this case, before you can even attempt to go through the sources, you need to think about what you learned in the classroom so that you can be able to combine the pieces, actually get the information together in order for you to be able to write a paragraph. So now the homework is in your worksheet. It is still based on this lesson, but it's a homework. And in this case, the focus is more on paragraph writing. So all the sources are provided there from source 3A up until 3D. So you'll be using the sources together with your own knowledge to answer the paragraph question. So based on what we discussed today, just a summary, just to reflect back, we have discussed different civil rights movement campaigns and marches. So now we have discussed the March to Lincoln Memorial, which led to the signing of the Civil Rights Act. We also discussed the Birmingham campaign, which ended segregation. And then we discussed the 3 Selma Montgomery marches, which is the first march, second march, and third march. And all this march, the first one was not a success because they were violently attacked. The second one, again, was not a success because they had to turn back as they were violently attacked by the state troopers again. But fortunately, the banning of the march was lifted. It means now they were given a go-ahead. Now the march was legal. Hence, they were able to take part in the third march, which led to the signing of the Voting Rights Act, which gave African Americans or everybody in USA the right to do what? To vote. Now, let us look at what we will be discussing in the next lesson. In the next lesson, we'll be focusing on the Black Power movement, which is an essay. So thank you for watching this lesson. See you next time. Bye.